Welcome to our second installment of the Feel Good Hunger Project Empower Hour. I am really excited for tonight's presentation with Sara, but I am going to pass it over to our lovely Margot to introduce Sara, our speaker this evening.
Hello, everyone. So Sara Wilson has worked with the Hunger Project's communications team for 10 years, beginning as a part-time associate during the 2010 fall event and now serving as the senior manager of global communications. Life looks a little different during the pandemic, but in the before times, Sara's free time was largely spent producing comedy shows, Comic-Cons, lecture series, and any other live show that would have her. These days, she sticks to Doctor Who reruns and advocates for her unhoused neighbors. She currently lives in Los Angeles with her partner and 2 idiot cats.
Nice, thank you. It's funny to hear someone else reading your words. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I have a second screen off here to the left of me, so I'm not just ignoring everyone. I'm just trying to engage with my screen. I'm really honored to be here. I love Feel Good. I went to the Big Cheese in 2013, maybe before. I don't really know. I thought Chloe would pop in knowing when I was
I think
there.
you've been to 2.
I have.
You've been to one in Colorado.
Yes.
Which was probably 2013.
And then one at UVM.
One at Bernathen.
That's what I meant.
Probably 2017.
Yes. So I love Feel Good. And I think it's such a neat on-ramp into not just the Hunger Project, but just being like just global citizenry in a really functional and modern way, right? Putting yourself and your consumerism and your joy and all of it, just really aligning that with your values. I think Feel Good is great. So today we're going to be doing, the prompt I had was sort of can I just launch in? Is that what you want me to do? Okay. Today's, we're going to talk a little bit about marketing and storytelling and kind of how those two things tie together. I will say, I did preface this with like, do not judge my presentation. Listen to my words, do as I say, not as I do, and we should be good. But I really, at the end of this, what I want all of us to do is just be comfortable in telling our own stories, I think is the really important part of this. And I am happy to answer any questions. I'm gonna go kind of marketing and then storytelling and then a little bit more detail, but I'm also available at any time. I was telling Chloe this. If you ever have an idea you want to brainstorm about marketing or communications or anything, I am available to Feel Good fully. So think of me as a resource. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Alrighty. Can everyone see that? Lovely. All right, so yeah, pretty straightforward. Telling your story, why it matters when you are selling grilled cheese. So we're going to start with sort of marketing 101. Is anyone here a marketing student? Can you do like your little raisey hand or unmute and tell me? I know there's a lot of people with cameras off. No? Nobody? Great.
After today, after you train me on it.
There you go, Brandy. Thank you. This is, I will say, the simplest distillation of marketing that you will ever get, but also is like an actual semester's worth of work. So it's very easy. I use this as our sort of Bible. Some of the stuff I'll tell you is stuff that we go through every time we're coming up with a campaign, every time we're looking at our messaging calendar. It's sort of a tried and true. The tools I'm going to share with you are things that are valuable, not just to telling your story for Feel Good, but just if you ended up going into nonprofit communications, if you end up going into any communications or marketing, these are theoretically tools that you can use. So types of marketing, again, oversimplification: outbound marketing, inbound marketing. We'll come to you, you'll come to us. What we're going to talk about today are really going to live on this inbound marketing. And that's kind of where the Hunger Project lives. It's where Feel Good lives. There is some outbound marketing, but it just has a really different vibe and a very different motivation, right? So outbound marketing is profit driven or competition based, right? Profit. If we sell more sandwiches, we'll make more money. That's great. and you want that, but that shouldn't be your end goal. We're looking for our end line. Competition, we need to sell more sandwiches than the dining hall, right? Looking at framing it against something else. If you find yourself in that space, rethink the strategy, rethink sort of what you're doing. The inbound marketing is a little bit more esoteric, and I will explain the difference between these two things of identity-driven value versus value-driven identity. So identity-driven value is if you don't buy sandwiches, world hunger gets worse. And value-driven identity is if you buy more sandwiches, you'll change the world. And this is called societal marketing. Societal marketing is all the rage. If you Google societal marketing, if you Google societal marketing associate, people are just going crazy for that as a position right now. It used to be just like new media. Now it's societal marketing. And here are two examples of that, right? So I'm sorry about the quality of this. This is a poster from World War II. Production or destruction. Everybody, let's focus on industrialization or the world ends, right? Like that is still very much, whoops, did I go the wrong way? Yeah, that's still very much inbound marketing. You want people to identify themselves by the values that they're displaying. That's what that is. You're trying to say like, if you don't do this, it's all wrong. It's the core of who you are. Ben and Jerry's is the opposite of that. That's value-driven identity. So that's, okay, hey, just so you know, this is who we are. If you would like to align with this, you can come to us, right? It's much less like it's your fault and more just if you would like to signal or be aligned with that actual lived experience, then you will come to us. So that right there is kind of where we live. And that's where our bread and butter is. It's where we get our strongest investors, our longest lasting investors. I think a lot about, has anyone seen is it the ASPCA that does the like, in the arms of the angel, right? That is such a cheat. It's such a cheat because all you're doing is getting rid of any sort of higher thought or long lasting relationship with that person. You're just sticking a spear in their heart and you're saying like, if you don't do this, the baby dies. Like it's a different strategy. It's a totally different strategy from what we want to do because you can only do that so many times before someone is fatigued. What you can do, it's still value driven. There's still that heart driven alignment in what we do, but it doesn't run out of energy because it's, like I said, it's positive, it's growth minded. It's something that contributes to who you are. It doesn't take from who you are. So anyways, I will stop going over that, but that's just where I want you to see the slight difference from where we are. And if you find yourself veering into that other area with your marketing, it might be effective. I'm not going to say it's not effective to put like flies in the eyes is what I call it for our marketing. But we at the Hunger Project have a strict no flies in the eyes policy for that reason, because it's not sustainable. So it will be effective. It just won't be on brand and you'll exhaust your audience. Okay. So how do we market? We'll come back around to this. This is actually sort of a homework piece, but again, I wanted you to have the tools in your hand that everybody uses in marketing, and you can go back to this well over and over and over again. So you want to just start with research. Who are we talking to? What do we want to be talking? Who do we want to be talking to? Planning. What are we talking to them about? Go over into strategy. Where are we talking to them? How are you talking to them? When are you talking to them? And then measuring them. Do they care? Do they keep coming back? Is it efficient, right? So you should sort of, every deli should be kind of going through this process, I don't know, once a semester. Really just taking a good hard look and seeing who it is you're talking to. Are you talking to the people that you want to be talking to? There could be a different audience. I know that, you know, we're looking primarily at students, but there are all sorts of demographics in our student bases. So it's really, really important to get this who we are talking to aspect down. This worksheet was actually just used, was it this last weekend, Brandy? 2 weekends ago? I can't even remember. This last weekend time. Is something that we shared with our some of our most committed investors at the Hunger Project. We brought them together for a leadership conference, a virtual leadership conference. And we asked them to do this exercise. It can look different. You can find a million different sheets like this online, but it is important to do because you don't want to talk to everyone. You don't need to talk to everyone. You don't need mass appeal. What you need to do is be talking to the people who are most likely to engage with you and then become your champions. And we'll kind of get into how to do that next. But it's important. Do this. I would say, again, like this is going to be a homework or an after follow-up that I recommend everyone do. If we have time, we can do one even together. I'm not sure what we look like in terms of time, but it's really, really important. Yeah, it's just very valuable. I think if you start it, especially as a group, you came together to do it, you would realize that you had a lot of insight into where you should be focusing your efforts. Okay, so next, I need to go back to my notes because so far this is just me talking. All right, we're gonna move into storytelling. Spoilers, I will say, I'm skipping sort of like right ahead to the end here. Whoops, hold on, let me make sure I've got everything. That's your product. Stories are your product, actually. It's not sandwiches. So it's great that you sell sandwiches and that is hugely important, but it's not actually what your product is. It's story, but it might not be the story that you think it is. So we'll kind of get through that. Understanding someone else's story, I think we all know, is one of the most profitable industries in the entire world. I'm thinking movies, but also video games. Does anyone here play video games? No, just me as a dork? Great. Video games actually outpace the revenue of movies. I was looking up this number by like a factor of 10. It is wild to think of how many, like all of Hollywood and Bollywood combined is dwarfed by how much money is spent on video games. So that's bajillions of people, which is not a real number, spending gajillions of hours and I don't know, bazillions of dollars on the storytelling experience. But the kicker is it's living someone else's story. Like that is important. That is so much time and money invested in someone else's story. So one of the questions that we got was, Chloe had sent something ahead of time and it said, how do you tell an impactful story that isn't your own, or should you even do that? And I think the point I want to make here is like, yes, absolutely. We should all be telling one another's stories all the time because it's what we're so interested in. How do you authentically and thoroughly engage? How do you do this quickly when you don't know anything about the Hunger Project or the Hunger Project partners? Compelling stories are the answer to all of this. But more than video games, more than movies, do you know what everyone's favorite story is? The one they can tell front to back? Anybody got a guess? It's their story. We love to talk about ourselves so much. We love it so much. So I actually need someone to demonstrate this really quick. I need a volunteer to tell me their story in 2 minutes or less. And I want you to, somewhere in the course of that, answer 2 questions for me: who you are and why you're in Feel Good. So I need someone to pop up. Someone's going to talk. I will sit here all night. It's super easy. 2 minutes. Who are you? Why are you with Feel Good?
I can do it.
Take it away.
Is it just like the story of like Feel Good? It's not my entire life story, right? It's 2 minutes.
I don't care. That's up to you. You've got 2 minutes to tell me who you are and why you're with Feel Good.
Okay, someone time me. My name is Maya Stevens. I am from Blacksburg, Virginia originally, and I'm a student at the University of Virginia now. And I'm a psychology major, and I've always been a big dork about research and like social influence and social dynamics, and have recently kind of driven more into the policy world of that, which kind of intersects a lot with actually a lot of the work Feel Good does. I joined Feel Good my very first semester, first year of college, because there was a big sign that just said Feel Good, and I was like, well, that's nice. That's a nice thought. And then there was grilled cheese on the side, and I was like, that's quirky. And so I talked to some people there, and really I joined Feel Good because the people were so amazing. Like I stayed for like just how kind and fun and energetic the people were, and then slowly dived more and more and more into the cause and the impact we can really make. Have been there ever since. Well, I was like deli manager, now I'm co-president, and yeah, have really like completely enjoyed the time and have been able to actually use like some of the stuff I've learned from Feel Good to kind of put that into my now like public policy graduate program. And so I've been doing, like I just did a project on food deserts for instance. So that's been really, really great. And that's probably less than 2 minutes, but I'm at the end of that.
That's great. Yeah, thank you so much for telling your story. I appreciate it. It's lovely to meet you. And thank you for being with Feel Good. All right, so she had a prompt to tell me who she was and why she was with Feel Good. So now I need someone else to tell me Maya's story. What did she just say? Anybody? I'm gonna look to Feel Good leadership if no one else answers, but yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. I will tell you again, I'm going to reiterate how not good my presentation looks as we go on. Perfectionism is not the goal here. Who can tell me Maya's story?
I can give it a go. I'm Julie, by the way. Maya got interested in Feel Good because she's always been interested in like policy and social change, but stayed in Feel Good because she loves the people, and is really enjoying kind of implementing that now in her policy graduate program. That was a very small summary, but that's what I got from it.
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Julie. Where are you based?
I'm in Burlington, Vermont.
Nice. Oh, I love Burlington.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you diving in there. I would like to just point out, what were some differences between those two stories? Who can tell me one thing that was different between those two stories? I'm gonna get this out of you guys.
Well, mine was shorter and more concise than Maya's.
Yeah, that's one. I have another observation too. I would just be interested to know if anyone else saw anything else about it as well.
There are fewer specifics in Julie's,
Mm-hmm.
like specific names.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
It felt kind of like Julie was answering a question very specifically, but when Maya talked, she kind of chose where she went with like your more general question.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Those were all great. So another thing that I would point out is that both Maya and Julie focused on her impact in the world and goals and vision and drives and dream versus sort of the like baseline who you are. Where are you from? How old are you? What school do you go to? Right? You shared those things. But you really brought us to, and what stuck out was what you've learned, right? Like what is the contributing factor? Who do you surround yourself with, and what are you accomplishing together? So I think that's super important, and that's not always going to be the same thing. Different groups of people are going to have different things rise to the top. But I think it's really compelling and really telling that this group of people, this very small sample size, that is what came to the top for this, right? Is that value-driven alignment and or value-driven narrative, and that's kind of why we're all here. And that's really important to remember, because that's what is going to be the driving force. Again, I will keep hitting this home, is that value base, as you know, is your bread and butter for all of this. So who here has heard of the hero's journey? Oh, look at that graphic. Chloe, Andrew, anyone else? No? All right. So the hero's journey is very standard. It's super baseline storytelling. If you don't use it currently and you are a writer or doing any sort of narrative-based stuff, use this model and you will not go wrong. There are other ways to tell stories, but this is the most effective. And I would say that the majority of the stories that you even know fall into this model. Lord of the Rings is the most obvious, but also 50 First Dates. Like every single story that I just dated myself by using that reference falls into this narrative, falls into this cycle. So really quick, I'll just walk through it a little bit. So it starts with a departure, right? So you're going off onto an adventure. Oftentimes you meet a mentor, and then the journey really progresses when you go from known to unknown. So you have to sort of enter that discomfort. And that's when the bulk of it happens. Then you get into initiation. The way I describe this is just like magic shit. Like it's just where stuff goes wild. It's where you fall off a cliff and everything happens and a dragon shows up and sometimes you die. And that's sort of, you hit your base, you hit the abyss, and that's death and rebirth. And it's really hard. And that is the darkest part of the journey. And then you start on your return, but your return isn't super hunky dory. It's not like, and now we're fixed. You realize that you have to have other people. You climb a mountain and you fall back down a mountain. And there are all these trials and tribulations. You finally atone, which is just really, I mean, I don't have to explain atone, but you atone and then you cross back into the known and you come back home where you started, whatever that is, metaphorically, physically, sort of all glowy and annoyingly self-assured, right? Like you did it. You're amazing. You're the hero of this story. And most narratives are going to fall into this arc. And as you're telling stories, as you're putting together social media campaigns, right? As you're writing an email, as you're putting signs up, putting someone at the center of this story is really integral to the work that we do, because we are all stories individually and collectively. So knowing your own arc and realizing another person's arc is a truly uniquely human experience. There's no other species that does that. It's something that we have and is really, really powerful. There's my favorite word in the entire world, and I say it way too often, is the word sonder. Has anyone heard the word sonder before? Is it because I talked about it, Chloe? Yeah, I talk about it a lot too. So sonder is a word that was, I don't know, invented. Do you invent words? I guess so. That came about in the 80s, I think. And it literally is just a combination of the word, well, I don't even know what it is, but I know it comes from the word wonder. So to wonder is to look at something and wonder, right? We don't have to explain wondering, but to sonder is to do it with a human being. And it specifically means to look at another individual and recognize that their lived experience is just as nuanced and complex as your own. And I know that sounds very duh, right? Like we all live experiences. I understand that you're living and breathing and not interacting with me. I tend to experience sondering again in the before times when I would be like on a bus and like leaning on the window and looking out the window. And in New York City, seeing someone standing on a street corner who is having a day, a full day. They've stepped in a puddle, they talked to their mom on the phone, they got a demotion or a promotion, right? They're eating a pretzel. They're having this whole lived experience that extends not just all the way back into their history, but decades into the future. And they will never know that I existed, ever. They will never experience me in any way. And that doesn't make their story less compelling, and it doesn't make my story less compelling because we haven't interacted. What makes it compelling is that we can see that in one another. And so I would say to hold that in mind as you are telling other people's stories. And I think that's really hard to do. It's hard to look at a picture of someone in our programs and do anything other than to say, like, this is Maria, she's 19 years old, she's got 2 kids, she lives in this community, she's taken this many trainings, and this is her role in her, her job now. Like, those are great, but is that compelling? It's the same story over and over and over again. So really taking a moment to think through what are the complexities of that person. Anyways, I just kind of want you to keep that in mind because yeah, it's critical to everything that we do. All right, so now I've just gone on and on and on and on about stories and how they're important and they're compelling and you have to be really detailed and there's like a whole journey. So Maya, can you retell me your story?
Yeah, I guess.
And I want to know who you are.
Okay, sure.
There's no
Okay.
time constraint on this one, by the way. 0.
Okay. Well, I will say my name again. Once again, I'm Maya Stevens.
Hi, Maya.
I'm a student at the University of Virginia. And I guess like especially ever since going to college, like I kind of said, I'm a psychology major and I've just been really socially oriented. Especially like I love research, but I also like I love the complexities of like how dynamics like social dynamics work and
Why?
how we can apply. Yeah.
Why?
Why? Because I think it's like the core being of like every like of living kind of. It's like anytime you ever would see another person, or even when you don't, like when you're on social media, like you're always reacting to another person. And so understanding like how we're all connected and how we understand one another is just like maybe the most interesting thing you could ever look at, in my opinion.
That's neat.
But then also like using that to make impact and like be able to nudge people to do things that are helpful for themselves and for society is like kind of how I would like to use that to create change and give back to communities that have given a lot to me, obviously. And do you want me to answer the feel good question still?
No, I mean, it's entirely up to you. I think I want to know what you think your story is. Like if you were meeting someone for the very first time and they were just getting to know you,
Mhm.
are there any other details that you would fill in?
I would say that they're just getting to know me, that they should know that I'm like pretty driven and hardworking, and I really, really, really want to make impact on the lives of marginalized communities. And so it's
Why?
I like the question, and so I would want people to understand that about me. But and then I also in my free time like to hang out with friends and my family, because my friends and family are very, very important to me as well. Sleep a lot. And I try to go outdoors like at least like a good amount each day, just not necessarily like going crazy outdoors or doing crazy stuff, but just like get some fresh air.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So thank you. I really, really appreciate it. So what I'm demonstrating is we all have really, really intricate stories, and it takes a lot to get it out of someone. But when you do, that's the person you're connected with. The person I know now most in this entire space is Maya. Like, hi. And I'm happy to reciprocate, right? I will at any time tell you my whole story if it's something that you want in return. But you and I, if I had to ask a favor, if I had to continue to have a conversation, I would talk to you. And that's just because I know you, and because I asked you questions, and because I asked you to tell your story again and again and again. Because the thing that I'm centering is you, and what you keep centering for me is your impact. And like I'm just trying to get you to buy a grilled cheese sandwich and hang out. But you've shown up already, right? You're going to go over and above and beyond to tell me that you want to demonstrate impact, because you know why you're like, especially with feel good stuff, like you guys are very open with what you're doing, right? You're like, here, have a conversation, and world hunger. Like it's not a secret. You're not getting someone who's buying a grilled cheese sandwich and they're like, what? Like, I don't want to talk about this. Someone who's there is very eager to do that value identity alignment. The thing is that you coming to them and telling them someone else's story is not going to do it for them. They're there because they want to demonstrate their story. So ask questions. That would really be my biggest recommendation. So that's your goal. You are connectors. I pulled this from the website, Chloe. I like youth are the future. That's fun to me. But all you're trying to do is get the people that you're talking to into the exact same narrative as our program partners. So it requires you, in order to do that, it requires you to actually know more about the person you're talking to. So is it right to tell someone else's story? Yeah, absolutely. But first you need to know the story of the person you're talking to. And I would encourage you that every person who's here should spend more time asking questions than telling things, because the things around you can tell the story. You can put up a big sign that says 690 million people in the world are living in chronic hunger. You can put up a sign and say, you know, malnutrition leads to stunting in children. You have all these different ways to signal it. What you're selling is an opportunity to tell a story, like I said at the top, but it's not the story of you. It's not the story of Feel Good. And it's not even the story of our partners. It's the story of the person you're talking to and how they are a part of our partner's story, right? I know it's like, whatever, it's esoteric and silly, but you have an opportunity basically just to like glean information from people. And that's where I think you should be spending the most amount of your time. So we can get into questions, and I have other exercises, but one of the ways, I mean, this is all very like, tell a story, generic. There are really specific ways that you can do this that will save you time and energy and be effective. I don't know if this is stuff you do already. I have no idea. Oh, you know what? I'm going to back up just a little bit. So I actually have specific things for this, and I can share these with you as well. A really good way to link people together is through challenge. Again, it's sort of tugging on that same heartstring as the starving puppy. Like it's similar to that, but it's getting someone else to realize their own challenge instead of othering another person's challenge. So for example, one of the things that I would do in the course of this conversation, as you're getting someone to tell you their story, is ask them what they think their biggest challenge is, either personally, as a generation, right? Like have a prompting question that gets them to get into what are their challenges, and then show them how that ties into the narrative. So if I asked someone and said, what is your biggest challenge as a generation? And they said, I think it's climate change. I'd be like, absolutely. It is impacting people all over the world. I'm going to tell you about this couple in Ethiopia that you're looking at. They depleted their newlyweds, they're 19 and 20. They depleted their soil from farming within like the first year of having their farm because they didn't understand how to grow what they needed to grow without depleting the nutrition from the soil. So we partnered with another group called We Forest. They now plant trees that actually replenish the soil. So now they not only are able to grow more food for themselves and their families, but they are yielding enough in their crops because they don't have to let them lie fallow. They can grow all year round now because of what they're growing. They are now selling that, and it's now an income generating opportunity, right? So they are both saving themselves from malnourishment. They are generating income. They're putting savings together. They've built this house. Like there's so much that happens, and it's all related. This is a really sloppy version of this, but it's tied into climate change, right? It's also tied into when we talk about, when I say, what is the greatest challenge of your generation? I'm Gen X, and I know, no, I'm a millennial, and we never stop talking about college debt, right? Like I know most of us don't. I know millennials for sure. It's like the one thing we complain about constantly. And debt is a big thing, right? Well, let me tell you about either this situation, these folks who are finding themselves possibly in debt because they, whatever, had all sorts of stuff going on. Also, let me tell you about this women-led savings group in Bangladesh, in which all these women, their husbands had put them in debt. And so they decided them personally, they were going to start a savings group together. And here's how they addressed it. They're sending their kids to school now. Now they're not going into debt with it. Like, again, these are sloppy examples. Gender inequity. Let me tell you about this woman in Ghana who has made sure that during COVID-19, people are getting access to their birth control she mobilized 18 other people in her community and is bringing birth control from the epicenter to them directly because they aren't able to travel through safety concerns or any other limitation that's happening right now around COVID. Obesity. Let me tell you about this community in Mexico that took control of their own nutrition by growing everything vegan and that was indigenous to their region. Like there are stories that you can tell that tie directly into someone else's lived experience in your community. So with that, sorry, I'd missed that part because one of the things I recommend you doing is pick 5 stories. 5 stories a year. Like this is the biggest trap that everyone falls into when they're trying to communicate about the Hunger Project. It is a fire hose of information. The chronic hunger is so much. There are so many people in need, and every single person, as we've talked about, is complex and they are their own intricate, detailed story. So you're never going to be able to tell that story for everyone. What you can do is pick 5 stories that are compelling for you and your deli. Tell those stories over and over and over again. You're going to hear it 30 times. The person you're talking to is going to hear it 1 out of the 5 times that you tell them. Because again, they're hearing their story. You should be asking them about themselves. So really narrow it down. Just go super easy. Pick 5 stories, build an entire thing around it. make principle-driven recipes, right? The recipes are amazing. They're huge. Does anyone watch Bob's Burgers? Okay. So Andrew, on Bob's Burgers, you know his like burger board where it's like thematic burgers and it's always like puns and whatnot? You could do that for value-driven food, right? Like you could very concretely come up with sandwich names that tie directly into values. And it's very silly. And it can be the same, I don't know, you can pull from whatever you want to do. I always use the Hunger Project's 10 principles because they're quick and easy. But I think getting creative and really bringing the sandwich itself into this story narrative, because again, you're not selling a sandwich, you're selling a story. And the sandwich can be that story. So there are all sorts of ways of just having that be like a physical representation. Brandy, I'm actually glad you're here because one of the things I was going to bring up is during the leadership conference. Can you please tell everyone what you sent to everybody that participated in our virtual conference?
Yeah, so we sent these welcome boxes, and these welcome boxes had these really notebooks for the weekend that walked them through the weekend and what their agenda would be and a way for them to take notes. It had a water bottle. It had a feel-good recipe for a grilled cheese, and it had a recipe for a THP cocktail. And it had some feel-good stickers and feel-good bag and this actual bag. And what else did it have? I think that was it, right?
I think it was like a magnet, something else.
Yes, there was a magnet, but like I said, it did have a feel-good recipe from one of the universities.
Thank you. And Brandy packed all of those, and I am so grateful. But one of the keys, the important thing that we had there was a physical interaction with a story. People came and attended. All of those people attended our virtual conference. They heard stories from the field about what was happening with COVID. We've got all those videos online. They're on YouTube. They're compelling. They're perfect. They're wonderful. Like you're hearing from people in Uganda and from India and from Mexico about exactly how COVID has impacted them. But we knew that they needed, the people who were listening to it need a physical something to interact with that, to bridge that idea to what their physical lived experience is. Like for as intricate and beautiful as we are, we're also very simple. We're super simple creatures. So the sandwich for Feel Good can be that thing. It's just a token representation of the stories that you are selling. And then lastly, this is something that's just a resource that I want to share with y'all is give them a chance to rethink their role in the story, but make sure that you give them a role. So this is the Sidekick Manifesto is basically a little comic book that someone had written, a professor actually wrote a couple of years ago. And it's got way too much text if you're asking me, but it goes into how, and I'll send a link out to this, or Chloe, I'll give you stuff to follow up. But it literally creates a story about the sidekick who is the donor, or the implementer, right? Like the idea of this is it makes the sidekick narrative compelling and exciting. And you're a sidekick to the people who are actually doing the work to end hunger, i.e. the people living in hunger themselves. So you telling someone to be a part of the story and not centering them in it doesn't necessarily have to mean that they're not important. It just means that that's a really exciting, like siloed part of the story. So I'll share the Sidekick Manifesto of that in action. All right, I'm gonna stop because we can do a couple of other things. But I want to check in. Chloe or Margot or anyone. Should we leave time for questions? Do you want me to go?
Yeah, we can do some question time if anyone has any questions for Sarah right now. I love the Sidekick Manifesto. I think it's something that all of our chapter leaders could, and all of our Feel Good community members could benefit from in storytelling and all of the great stuff you've been schooling us on this evening, Sarah. So I will open it now for anybody who might have some questions for Sarah. And if not, maybe we could start doing an investor persona together as a group.
Yeah. And it could be specific, be anything. Nobody?
I have a question. As you talk about the approach, how recent of a development is this in like the marketing world? Like how long have companies been taking this approach, or like around what time did people start to realize that this was an effective form of marketing? And like, was there like an event that happened that led them to realize like telling it in this way is what's going to work? Or just speak more about the timeline, I guess, of like what changed and how it took effect.
Yeah. I mean, I will geek out about this all day. I don't know if that's interesting to anyone. I will say the short version of that is corporate social responsibility has been around for a long time, right? Like Johnson & Johnson was giving money back to the community a long, long time ago because of tax reasons, right? Like the government was like, you have too much money. And they're like, okay, we'll give back to the community, right? Like that's not old. That's a pretty long-standing thing. Proving that in and of itself was profitable, and then championing, it's a dumb word, an actual cause is pretty new. And I will say, like, that's, you can't see my phone, I've got my case on it. One of the biggest things that pushed this forward was in the late 90s, early 2000s, Red. Does anyone else have a Red product? I don't know if you guys can see it. Boop. Do you know what Red is?
Yes.
Yeah. Does anyone else know what Red is? No? That's so interesting. That's even funnier to me because it was like the biggest thing in the world. So Bono is associated with, is he still associated with it? It was about ending, it started because of the AIDS epidemic in Africa. And what was the name of Apple? Bill Gates. Nope. Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs realized that if he were to partner with Bono and this organization called Red, and that like a portion of the proceeds from every single one of, I think it was the iPad that first, or the iPod mini that first started it. And oh man, I can like feel that little trackpad. It was so weird. That was huge. They made so much money on that. It was unbelievable. They were shocked by it. They thought it was going to be, again, this sort of like, leave us alone, we're doing good. And instead it turned into one of their most profitable lines. So I would say that's really when it hit mainstream. It was happening before that. Like all sorts of companies have always given back, but to make it something where your purchasing power is in and of itself a demonstration of value alignment is relatively new, as in within the last 20 years. Because prior to that, it was all competition based, really. I mean, or it was like I showed you with that World War II marketing, where it was like, if you don't buy bail bonds, Hitler's going to kill you kind of marketing, which was violent. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
What other sort of questions do you recommend? Like you said, one of the ones is you can ask like, what is the greatest challenge facing your generation? Like, do you have any other sample questions? Because like I really like that one, and it doesn't feel like it would be hard to ask at a deli, whereas sometimes just like trying to get information out of people, I think can feel hard.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to, unfortunately, because you do have what, like 20 seconds of someone's maybe undivided attention, if even that, you do have to get into something that is going to sort of be like, oh, no one's asked me that today, right? So asking someone their major or what they're focused on is a really good way to get to know them, but they answer it 30 times a day. So you really need to find those questions that kind of offset them, right? So it can even be leading questions. Like one of the things that I have done in the past is like when we're at, again, before times when you would go to conferences, I would ask people the last organization they volunteered with, or I would ask them the last place they donated. And I think for students, like volunteerism is a big part. Where was the last place that you volunteered? And if they haven't, then they go into this whole demonstration of values. They're like, well, I have, I don't, but I'm very interested in this issue, right? Like they will overperform. They will tell you everything you need to know. And then you take that information and you just find a story that's relevant. Like I said, pick 5 stories, pick one of those stories and be like, oh, love that. You know who else was really into education? This woman. She adopted 16 kids, got them all in school, and has like a, I don't know, new lease on life, throws birthday parties. I think that is a good way of getting someone. I know it makes it sound shady, but you're really just trying to get someone to demonstrate their values. So asking them questions that you wouldn't necessarily hear all the time. I'm trying to think of another one. When was the last place you volunteered? Because you don't want to do, have you heard of the Hunger Project? Oh, have you ever traveled abroad? That's a good one. Have you ever traveled abroad? Oh yeah, I went to Europe. That's great. Anywhere else you'd like to go? Is there anywhere in the world that you haven't gone that you'd like to go? Right? Like getting someone to think outside of their geographic location is really big. Especially because it's not like, what was your favorite vacation? That kind of thing. Does that help? I can also come up with like a whole other list of questions. I feel like, man, Brandy, we talk to investors all the time and just try to get information out of them.
Yeah, some of the ones I like to ask them is like, you know, what cause is closest to your heart? Tell me what. And then when they answer it, I ask them their why. Like I love to explore the why.
Yeah. Well, as poor Maya experienced, the why is key. That is truly the best question you ask is why. I don't care where you start. Yeah. You could start with what's your name? Sarah. Why? Well, I don't know. My mom, you know, like everybody's, I've got a story there. Andrew, I have a question for you. Why are you named Andrew? Do you know?
Are you like, is this just, are you just asking? Oh, you're
asking you. I just want to know.
I think it was the only name both my parents could settle on because they both wanted a different name.
That's sweet. I love that.
There is a why there though.
There's a why. Brandy, okay, sorry.
Yeah, I think that I always like to say what's closest to your heart, and I always like to ask, what's another one I like to ask? If I always say, like, if you had to pick one passion to pursue in life, you know, what would that be? Because usually if you have to narrow, like if you get them to narrow it down to one opportunity, you'll get more out of them. That's what I normally see. So.
Mm-hmm. Especially right now too, I think getting people to answer, do some like forward thinking. Where will you volunteer when you have more time? Where would you like to go? Where, you know, like, what are you going to do? Like getting people to
do it, because it also, right now we're in a space where it is very difficult to be, and we are approached by so much now. I think that it gives them an opportunity to narrow that space for them, and it makes them connect to a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Can I ask you a question, Sarah?
If you want to keep talking to me, we talk all the time.
Well, I know I get to talk to you all the time, but not everybody here has that luxury, that honor and privilege. Why do you work for the Hunger Project?
Ooh, good question. Well, so right, like I've got the two stories. So if I didn't really care about talking to you very much, I would say I work at the Hunger Project because the UN was my mecca. That's what I wanted to do. I went into conflict resolution. I wanted to save the world, and I am very value driven, and I am super performative about those values, right? Like I know who I am. And I got to work at the UN, and it was really, really bureaucratic. And so I realized that what I needed to do was go into a small-ish to medium independent nonprofit that was still doing the work I wanted to do. My minor was in gender and women's development. So that it was just a really natural fit with the Hunger Project. And I somehow came in through, like I said, an event. They were hiring, and I was like, I don't care what they're hiring for, I will be here. So that's how I got involved in it. It's why I switched. It's why I pivoted, because I knew that I wanted to get out of the UN. But really, the reason I work for the Hunger Project and continue to work for the Hunger Project is because my abuelita was, she was a a consul. My abuelo worked at the consulate, and so she was very well connected. She had every reason in the world to. They lived all over Latin America and I believe in Canada at one point, and she had every reason to sort of just be a diplomat's wife. And she ended up starting an income generating opportunity in the Dominican Republic during the Civil War. And I have her memoirs, and she was this fancy lady who wore rings, and she would like walk out into the mud and she would be like, okay, I've brought everyone sewing machines. We're going to learn how to sew things, and I'm going to take those back to the US and I'm going to sell them. And then I'm going to get that whole sort of like system in place. And there's actually a town in the Dominican Republic named after her now. So it just, I think for me, that's like the heart of it for me, is that my family, I come by it honest. My family gave me a good example. And the Hunger Project is the only place in the world where I found that alignment, in the belief that people are the answer themselves. Is that enough? Also, because Chloe works here, that's why, and Brandy. That's why I work here.
You worked there before I worked there. So I think I worked there because you worked there.
Well, stop. I work there because we just compliment each other all the time.
Really nice.
It's really nice. Yeah. So any other questions? Otherwise, I mean, we've only got, what, 10 minutes? I don't know if it's worth going through a thing.
Yeah, we're meant to wrap around 8 o'clock, 5 o'clock your time, dear Sarah.
5 minutos, right? Yeah.
Yes, so about 5 minutes. So if anyone has any last minute questions, this would be a great time. Sarah, I don't know if you want to to share your slides with me, and I'll send everything out to participants. And I'm reading in the chat Maya's suggestion of having a curated list of leading questions to use at delis, or even I could see you using these as recruitment tools too, of like trying to find your next chapter president and roping in those freshmen. And Margot, I'm glad to see that you think this could be a project that the education committee can take on. I think that would be really useful. So thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Sarah, so much for gracing us with your presence and your story, and challenging us to think about our stories and teaching us ways to share them effectively with one another. And now that we have the holidays coming up this week and into November and December, I think it would be a great time for us to practice with our family and our friends. So this came at a good time.
One of my favorite things is ask why until you literally can't anymore. Just see how long someone goes with why. It is amazing. If you've got the time, just settle back and just keep whying someone. Yeah, like a toddler, exactly.
Yep. If you've ever babysat anyone under the age of 5, you know what that can be like.
It. It's such a good way to get to know someone.
But why?
If you call your aunt or your family member to drink a little bit more wine, you can blame that on Sarah.
If you frustrate all of your family members, I'll take the blame. Just have them call me. I'll talk. I love strangers.
We'll give out your email.
Love it. Just give out my WhatsApp. Screw it. I'll talk to anyone.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, friends, for joining us tonight. I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving week and get some time off. I know many of you are heading into exam week or have just been doing lots of work, and I'm hopeful that you'll all get some good rest and relaxation time. But thank you for making time for this tonight. It was great to see all of you.
Thanks for everything you do. We couldn't do the Hunger Project without you. We need you. You're amazing.
So thankful for you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
Bye.